Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting from the Jazz Standard here in New York City. Blessing the band stage is Grammy-nominated composer, bandleader, and saxophonist Donny McCaslin. As you might know, 3 years ago, Mr. McCaslin was on his way to starting something musically different. In fact, his latest album, Fast Future, which is on the Greenleaf Music imprint, is really kind of continuing his lineage with jazz as well as EDM, electronic dance music. This album is produced by his dear friend and basketball partner, Mr. David Binney. And we sat down earlier and we talked about this album. We talked about his group. We also talked about the importance of how he's continuing to move forward at a time when jazz music is really trying to find young as well as older audiences to come together musically. We also sat down and talked about how he defined his voice through writing, as well as talked about his band. As you might know, his band that's playing with him this evening has been with him for the last 3 recordings. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the sounds of Mr. Donny McCaslin, live here at the Jazz Standard, here on the Pace Report, here in New York City. Donny, you know, the last time we broke bread was, oh my goodness, about 3 years ago. And we're at another part of your musicianship because Fast Future is your continuation into jazz meets EDM. Now, I want to know, at this point of your career, how has this been for you as a composer, and how has it been for you as a saxophonist?
Well, it's been great. I mean, I love playing with this group, and I feel like the chemistry that we've developed over the last few years has been, it's been exciting, been fun to be a part of, and fun to think about writing music for. So after Casting for Gravity, you know, that album had a certain energy, and coming after that, I felt like there was, another chapter that I wanted to explore. And so I had a lot of fun writing music for this record, and also thinking about what songs would be good cover tunes. And David Binney, who produced the record and did an amazing job, he had suggested the Baths record, which I got and loved immediately. There's a lot of tunes on there that would have been great to cover, but we covered No Eyes. That was the one that spoke to me. And then I've been a longtime fan of Aphex Twin, so covered one of his tunes. So, as a composer, I just love it because there's just so much room, and it's sort of uncharted territory in a certain way. As a saxophonist, it's still a challenge. It's a challenge to know what to play sometimes that's going to feel right for the kind of cross-genre thing that we're into. And so I'm just trying to continually ask myself that question when I'm playing. Does this feel honest? And to go forth with that, and not just to settle into things that I might do in a different context. So it's a good challenge for me. It's pushing me to think outside the box and to get some different things together and to imagine different things for the future on the saxophone. So it's good.
So this would be the equivalent of your musicianship and your phase of the music as what Miles did when he went electric.
Well, I mean, I would just honored to be mentioned in the same sentence as Miles Davis. But yeah, I think for me this is it's uncharted territory. Like, what is this music? It's not EDM, it's not jazz, and what do you call it? And we're improvising with this language and the drum and bass language, and Jason is improvising a lot. Jason Linder with sounds, and Mark Juliana, the drummers, has this he speaks this musical language, and he's drawing from that a lot when he plays. So it's really fun.
How have the music fans responded to this? Because now there's this cross-pollination of music genres that you are incorporating into this project. You're bringing in the younger generation, which they need to hear this, but also your older jazz fans, the old heads. They're kind of in awe about this too.
Yeah, I mean, it's been positive. And I would say, with young folks, I think I get a lot of positive feedback, and I think it resonates with them because it's the musical language of today. It's drawing from a lot of those elements. So I get a lot of positive feedback from them. And from older folks and older fans, I get positive feedback. And I think, I get comments like, last night a guy was saying, man, this is what, if David Bowie would have produced this record, in 1990 something, blah, 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 he said something along those lines. Some people will say, well, they're Weather Report fans or Headhunters or groups like that. And so you've got an older generation of jazz fans who have experience with groove-based music. And so I get a positive feedback from them as well. And I think also, a lot of my tunes, at least on this record especially, there's a strong melodic element, lyrical element to that. And I think people can relate to that even if they don't really understand, all of the influences that are happening. So it's been positive. It makes me think of my father. My father's like 88, and he's a piano player. Great American Songbook is his main thing. Also loves Cal Tjader. Loves, the R&B tunes like Feel Like Making Love, Mustang Sally, Mercy Mercy, things in that zone. So he listens to this project, and he would say, man, it reminds me of Dixieland. The interaction with the bass and the soloist, and I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting my father to feel that way. So anyway, yeah, people are positive about it.
David Binney is a very interesting guy musically because his role as a musician, and you guys both write some amazing compositions. The thing that I have to commend Mr. Binney is the fact that as a producer, you have to kind of listen to the artist and make sure that their musical ideas don't wander all over the place. And because this is an electronic project, I know that this had to be kind of grueling. There had to be like more than one or two takes of some of these songs.
Yeah, and well, he did a fantastic job, and he's a he's a great producer as well as musician, composer, saxophonist, all that stuff. And yeah, you're right. It is his role to feel like, okay, we've got it, or no, we need something else. And yeah, there were, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, there were a couple of these tunes that were definitely multiple takes. And then also, but beyond that, David, you mentioned hours. David put in a multitude of hours in post-production, sifting through all the things, adding synthesizers, maybe moving things, correcting things here and there. I mean, he really put in a lot of effort to make this record sound the way it does, and just adding a lot of the atmospheric stuff. I mean, I can't sort of emphasize his contribution to this record. And back to your point, yeah, he is great in the studio, very focused, and just really helps move the process along.
Donny, for the viewers out there who are not familiar with EDM, explain what EDM is and explain the concept and where some of the music came from and evolved from.
Well, I mean, honestly, I don't really have a great sense of the history of EDM. For me, this was more just listening to artists and drawing direct inspiration from them. Like, for example, Skrillex. I really love Skrillex, and a lot of my prep or whatever for this record was listening to different Skrillex things. And then there's a band in LA called Knower that's not necessarily an EDM group, but by any stretch. But it's this guy Lewis Cole and Genevieve Artriti, and they're fantastic. And so I was influenced by some of that music, by Deadmau5, and so. Yeah, honestly, I haven't done my homework in terms of the historical evolution of EDM, but I just sort of like I just jumped in with this stuff. And then the way I kind of work is that I just kind of let that stuff, wash over me or whatever, and then I just kind of try to vibe with it and then just see where it takes me. there's also other people who I didn't mention, but those are kind of the main guys that hit me with that.
Donny, there's a lot of interesting facets of your career. I've followed you. You've played, because this album is not a far stretch from a lot of the stuff that you've done. You've stretched out. You've played with Steps Ahead. You've played with Danilo Perez. You've played with David, collaborated with Maria Schneider. The composition part for you is something that is very, very important to you. And the great Gary Burton inspired you to really, really put an emphasis on that. Explain to him what he did for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was back when, when I was 20-something or whatever. I think I was asking him, because, when I was that age, it was sort of right around the time when the Young Lions thing happened. Maybe right before that or something, but a lot of those guys were contemporaries of mine, like Antonio Hart. We were in college together. He's maybe a couple years younger than me. Mark Whitfield, we were the same age, went to the same school. We played together a lot. I'm forgetting, I'm forgetting the names. Harper Brothers, all those guys. I'm around the same age, maybe a little younger, but so I think there was a certain pressure to find your own voice, and I don't know if it was just because of that. It's hard to remember, but just thinking about how do you find your own way in improvising and assimilating all these influences from the history of the music, and then kind of finding your own way. And what Gary Burton said to me at that time was like, write songs, because when you write songs, you're going to see what your musical language is, and he was right, because I started to work on it a little bit, and right away I could see, okay, I always go for this voicing on this kind of chord or whatever, and I was kind of confronted with what I was hearing and probably the limitations of that too. But it was great, because then I just kept working at it and writing and working on gathering language, and it helped me along the way to find my voice.
What do you tell younger musicians, especially saxophonists, who are trying to find their voice? Because I did some research on you. You said that at first you started listening to a lot of Train, but that shifted into Sonny Rollins later on when you got older. What is it that you tell the younger musicians who are getting into this, how to find their voice musically?
Well, part of it is recounting the story of Gary Burton in terms of composition, but part of it is also encouraging them to use their imagination. And what I mean by that is to think about when they're processing all the information that's coming their ways, for example, scale, and then the scale in intervals. Maybe you like the way that a certain kind of interval sounds, and if something like that resonates with you, maybe kind of be open to exploring that and trying to turn it into something, especially if it's not something that you hear a lot of folks doing, and being open to just whatever kind of moves you. Like for me, it was some sort of intervallic study that I thought, oh, that's really cool, and it kind of reminds me of Monk and the way Monk plays, or some of his language, and so that spoke to me. And then another example would be like I started hearing some folkloric music when I was playing with an Argentinian composer, and it was and the rhythmic thing was really interesting to me, and kind of set me off on a pathway of studying that. And then with Danilo Perez, he's just like he's just an amazing musician in so many ways, and so complete, and so he's got this deep rhythmic language, as and also harmony and melody and all that. But playing in his different groups of his, and him talking to me about how to develop my rhythmic vocabulary was just a totally life-changing experience for me. And so being open to those kind of things is something I talk about with, being open to what speaks to you, go for it. Don't worry about, don't worry about judging it, but just go for it. And then also to be open to what, getting feedback from peers who you trust, what can they tell you? I've learned a lot just asking questions from other musicians, and then hearing their feedback, with musicians who I have, rapport with. So just those kind of things. And also part of it is just staying the course and just being honest about what you like, putting those influences together, and things like that.
In high school, you learned from the Duke Ellington songbook.
Yeah.
Your music teacher had really transcribed all the Paul Gonsalves solos. And I was just reading a biography on Duke Ellington. I didn't realize how important he was as far as he wrote around his musicians.
Yeah.
And I noticed that when you write and when you play, you center it around everybody's energy or synergy within the nucleus of that band.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's just always been a role model to me. And that, what you described is what, my high school band director was talking about when I was a teenager. And then it made a lot of sense, and I've experienced it in different groups. Like there was a group that I had with David Binney, Kenny Wollesen, and Jeff Hirschfield, and Scott Colley, and it was this cooperative band, and that was a phase of my life where I was like, oh, okay, we're working, we're playing 2 or 3 times a week, workshopping tunes, and I got everybody's sound in my head, and I could write for that, and it was so, I learned so much doing that, and so I've tried to carry that on with my own groups, and certainly try to do that. It's just so much fun to write for people and to try to give them an opportunity to tell their story, in the context of playing in a group.
Yeah. There's a saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this group that you've had it for the last 2 or 3 records now. What has made this group so successful in interpreting your music and the vision of this music?
Well, I think it's that of course all all the guys in the band, they're all tremendous musicians, and they all work together well, and they have history together. Jason and Mark have played together for many years in Jason's band, Now Versus Now, and Jason has played in Mark's band, Beat Music, and Tim LaFave has also played in Beat Music. And I think actually Tim and Mark didn't start playing regularly until a few years ago, but they just have a natural kind of hookup. So I think it's just a good combination of, everybody's really open, everybody's kind of a present improviser in the moment, and then the musical language that we're drawn from, there's a lot of similarities. So it feels very cohesive, and again, it makes it so much fun. It's so much fun to listen to how these guys interpret the tunes that I write, and to see how the music evolves the more that we play together. And it inspires me. I've really learned a lot from hearing what they play and what they bring to it, and just even what they listen to, and all those kind of things all contribute to the overall vibe of the band.
Jason is also part of the Not Cohen's group also. Yeah, he's working too. He's a guy, and another unsung new guy I wouldn't say new guy, but he's been around for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember Jason. He grew up in New York, and I remember hearing him at Smalls years ago, I think with Abishai Cohen's band, the bass player. I don't know, it was 15 years ago or something, and I think that's when I first kind of got to know who he was. And then he, as he had his own big band. He's like there's a Chick Corea quote that is famous, but I think it is like something about Jason Linder is a musical universe, and I think that's true. And it's amazing how he brings that organic thing that he does to these different genres. I mean, when I first got to know him, it was acoustic piano, and then it just kind of then he's gone all these different directions, and it's been he's just a very inspiring musician.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. Reporting from the Jazz Standard here in New York City, I'd like to personally thank the talented Donny McCaslin for his time. Also, the staff and management here at the Jazz Standard for their warm hospitality. Also, I'd like to personally thank Mr. Jordy Freed for arranging my time with Mr. McCaslin here at the Jazz Standard for his performance. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.